Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got some really interesting material you sent in, and today, we're jumping straight into it. It's a theological analysis from Brother Donato S. Powell Sr., focusing specifically on Revelation chapter 14.
Right. Theological analysis and Old Testament context of Revelation chapter 14. And it's a great focus because, well, this chapter is pretty pivotal.
Pivotal how?
Well, think about what comes right before it. Revelation 13. That's all the intense, frankly disturbing stuff about the beast.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Exactly. So chapter 14, as Brother Powell puts it, it offers this kind of prophetic clarity and heavenly assurance. It's like a shift in perspective.
Okay, clarity and assurance. So it's still dealing with end times themes, but differently.
Absolutely. It powerfully presents the core gospel message, but it also includes some pretty serious warnings, and it looks ahead to where the faithful end up. It's like a lighthouse, shining through the storm described earlier.
Gotcha. Okay, so how are we going to tackle this? How does Brother Powell break it down?
He structures his analysis around three main parts of the chapter, and that seems like a good roadmap for us too.
All right, lay it out for us.
First, we've got the Lamb and the 144,000. That's verses 1 through 5.
Okay.
Then we get into the three angelic messages. That takes us from verse 6 all the way to 13.
Many messages. Sure.
And finally, the chapter closes with these two visions of harvest, the two harvests of the earth in verses 14 to 20.
Lamb and the 144,000, three angels, two harvests.
Got it. So our goal here is to really get under the hood, understand the theology, see those Old Testament connections Brother Powell highlights.
Exactly. And think about what it all might mean, for people listening today.
Perfect. So let's start at the beginning then. Verses 1 to 5. The Lamb on Mount Zion with this group, the 144,000.
Right. And the first thing you notice, or at least Brother Powell really highlights this, is the contrast.
Contrast with chapter 13. Absolutely. Chapter 13 is like the beast's world. Everyone's marked by him, worshiping him. Here, totally different picture. You've got the Lamb, Jesus, standing firm, and with him are these 144,000 people.
And they're marked too, right, but differently.
Yes, that's key. They have the Lamb's name and his Father's name on their foreheads. Brother Powell interprets this as, well, purity, obviously, but also divine ownership. They belong to God. It connects back to Revelation 7, where they were sealed.
So it's like God's brand versus the beast's brand.
In a way, yes. And the location, Mount Zion, that's hugely significant. Brother Powell points out how often Zion is used in the Old Testament. It's not just a place. It symbolizes God's presence, his protection.
Like in the Psalms.
Exactly. Think Psalm 48, Zion, the city of God, his holy mountain, the joy of the whole earth. It's about security, divine rule.
Right.
And Joel 2.32 even talks about deliverance and escape happening on Mount Zion for those who call on God's name. So putting the Lamb and this group there, it screams safety, divine authority, right after the chaos of chapter 13.
So it's a picture of hope, assurance, like you said earlier.
Definitely. It shows that even when things look bleak, God preserves his people. They're marked, they're secure with him. It's not just about being morally pure, though that's part of it. It's about God's unwavering commitment to those who are his.
And Brother Powell pulls in some specific Old Testament verses here, too.
He does. He mentions Isaiah 24.23, talking about the Lord reigning on Mount Zion. That reinforces the whole divine authority aspect.
Okay. God's in control.
Right. And linking that with Joel 2.32, the escape on Mount Zion, Brother Powell suggests this directly parallels the 144,000 being preserved here in Revelation, even with all the tribulation happening. It's a promise kept.
So if we bring that forward, what's the message for, us today?
Brother Powell sees it as a promise, really, a promise of preservation, of being kept spiritually safe, even if there's widespread apostasy or pressure to conform. But it's conditional, in a sense.
Conditional on what?
On loyalty to Christ, on spiritual integrity. He frames it as a call to stay undefiled by the surrounding culture's idols, resisting religious compromise.
That feels very relevant. Resisting cultural idolatry and compromise. I mean, what does that actually look like day to day? It can be subtle, can't it?
Oh, absolutely subtle. Brother Powell's analysis suggests it starts with discernment, really looking at the values the world pushes. Are they compatible with God's kingdom or not? It might mean pushing back against materialism, profit over people.
Or maybe holding firm on biblical ethics when it's unpopular.
Exactly. Relationships, morality, areas where the culture might pull hard in a different direction. It's about prioritizing God's ways consciously, daily, not getting swept away.
Okay, that makes sense. It's an active stance.
It has to be. Now that sets the stage nicely for the next section, the first of those three angels, in verses 6 and 7.
Right, the first angel. What's the message here?
It's a big one. The angel flies overhead proclaiming the eternal gospel and calls everyone everywhere to fear God and give him glory because the hour of his judgment has come.
Fear God, give glory, judgment's coming.
Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and sea and springs of waters. It's a callback to basics almost.
Back to basics, how?
Well, Brother Powell immediately links it to the first commandment, and the Shema Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That core idea of exclusive worship due only to the one true God.
And he calls it the eternal gospel.
Yeah, Powell emphasizes that phrase. It's just this isn't some new message just for the end times. It's timeless universal truth, the core reality.
And the focus on God as creator seems really strong there. Worship him because he made everything.
Exactly. It's not just fear the judge, it's revere the source of all existence. And Powell points out how this directly counters the beast's counterfeit worship we saw back in chapter 13. It even echoes the rationale for the Sabbath in Exodus 20.11, remembering God as creator.
So it's drawing a very clear line. Worship the creator, not the creation or the counterfeit.
Precisely. The beast demands worship but has no claim. The angel redirects it properly, and the Old Testament references Powell brings in really nail this down.
Like which ones?
Psalm 146.6. It's almost a direct quote, isn't it? God as maker of heaven, earth, sea, everything in them. And crucially, the God who keeps faith forever. His creative power is linked to his faithfulness.
Okay, creative power, faithfulness. What else?
Then there's Ecclesiastes 12.1314, that famous conclusion. Fear God and keep his commandments, for God will bring every deed into judgment. It ties worship and reverence directly to accountability.
Creator, judge, faithful one. It's all woven together.
It is. And Powell argues that for us, this means our evangelism, our sharing of the gospel, has to include both grace and judgment. It needs that reverence for the Creator, especially, he notes, in a world that's increasingly forgetting him or acting like he doesn't exist.
So a balanced message.
Yeah.
Not just easy grace, but also the reality of who God is in the coming judgment.
That seems to be the implication, is the eternal gospel, the full picture.
Okay. That leads us to the second angel then, verse 8.
Yeah.
This one sounds pretty dramatic.
It is. Short, sharp, and shocking. Babylon is fallen, that great city.
Babylon is fallen. What does Babylon represent here? It's symbolic.
Right, definitely symbolic. Brother Powell explains it represents sort of the ultimate organized rebellion against God. Think systemic corruption, spiritual adultery, the abuse of power on a global scale. It stands for the world system opposed to God.
And he says this is just a preview.
Yeah, Powell notes this is really just an announcement and anticipation. The full takedown and description of Babylon comes later, in chapters 17 and 18. This is like the headline flashing across the screen.
And the repetition is fallen. What's the significance of that?
Certainty, finality. Brother Powell points straight to Isaiah 21.9, which uses the exact same phrasing about the historical Babylon's fall. It means it's not a maybe, it's a done deal. Its destruction is assured.
Okay, so the world system opposed to God is doomed. What else from the Old Testament helps us understand this Babylon?
Well, besides Isaiah 21, Powell mentions Jeremiah 51, particularly verses 7 and 8. Jeremiah describes Babylon as this golden cup in God's hand that made the whole world drunk with its idolatry and immorality.
A golden cup making the world drunk.
Yeah.
That's potent imagery.
It really is. It suggests seduction, intoxication with false values. But then, Jeremiah says, Babylon suddenly falls and is broken. It captures both the allure and the inevitable judgment.
So thinking about that seductive golden cup today, what might that look like? Things that society holds up as valuable, but that might be spiritually intoxicating.
That's a great question to reflect on. Powell's analysis doesn't list modern examples, but you could think about maybe the absolute obsession with wealth or fame, or the pursuit of pleasure above all else, maybe even political ideologies that demand total allegiance, things that subtly draw worship away from God.
Things that promise fulfillment but lead away from God. So the application for believers.
Powell suggests it's a stark warning. Don't get entangled with Babylon-like ideologies. Don't align yourself with systems, whether economic, political, or cultural, that prioritize, profit over people, sensuality over sanctity, control over covenant relationship with God.
So be discerning about where we place our loyalties and what systems we participate in.
Exactly. It's a call to evaluate the underlying spirit of the systems around us and ask, is this ultimately building God's kingdom or is it part of Babylon?
Okay, that's sobering. And it leads directly into the third angel's message, which sounds even more intense, verses 9 to 11.
Yes, this one is arguably the most severe warning in the entire book. It spells out the consequences for anyone who does worship the beast and receives his mark.
And what are those consequences?
The text says they will drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured full strength into the cup of his indignation.
Full strength, undiluted wrath. That sounds terrifying.
It's meant to be. Brother Powell explains this imagery comes right out of the Old Testament. He points to Psalm 75.8 and Isaiah 51.17, which both talk about this cup of God's wrath reserved for the wicked. Full strength means exactly that judgment without any mitigating mercy for those who have decisively chosen the beast over God.
And it's not just a temporary punishment either, is it?
No. Powell highlights that the text describes torment with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, and says the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. He emphasizes this points to an eternal, conscious reality of judgment.
Wow. And witnessed by the Lamb himself.
Powell notes that aspect too. It underscores that this isn't arbitrary cruelty. It's presented as divine justice, rooted in God's own holiness, being enacted against willful rebellion.
Are there other Old Testament echoes for this kind of permanent judgment?
Yes, Powell mentions Psalm 75 again, the wicked draining the cup, and also Isaiah 34.10, which describes the judgment on Edom with smoke rising forever and ever from its burning pitch. The language is deliberately parallel, showing the finality and irrevocability of this judgment for beast worshippers.
So the takeaway here is pretty unavoidable.
Absolutely. Powell frames it as the non-negotiable nature of our fidelity to Christ. In a world that constantly pushes for compromise, this passage shouts that our eternal destiny hinges on our ultimate allegiance. Choosing momentary acceptance or ease over loyalty to Christ has, well, devastating eternal consequences.
Prioritize eternal allegiance over temporary comfort or acceptance. That's stark.
It is. It forces a serious evaluation of what truly matters. But then, right after this incredibly harsh warning, the tone shifts again, doesn't it? Verses 12 and 13.
It's like whiplash. Suddenly it's about the saints, their patience, and a blessing.
Exactly. Verse 12 says, "Here's the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus." And then verse 13 is that beautiful beatitude. "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on."
They get to rest from their labors. It's a complete contrast to the fate of the beast worshippers.
Total contrast. Powell connects this perseverance of the saints back to that Old Testament idea of the faithful remnant.
The remnant.
Yeah, the idea that through Israel's history, even when the majority went astray, God always kept a faithful few who held onto his covenant. Powell points to passages like Isaiah 10.00022 as an example. These saints in Revelation are like the ultimate expression of that remnant, holding fast through the final trials.
Okay, so endurance is key. And the reward for those who endure, even to death.
Divine rest, blessedness. Powell draws parallels here too, like Daniel 12.13, which promises Daniel he will rest and then rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the days.
Rest and an allotted portion.
And also Isaiah 57, verses 1 and 2, which speaks of the righteous being taken away from calamity and entering into peace. They find rest as they lie in death. It's a comforting promise after the struggles.
So what's the application Powell draws from this?
He emphasizes that this kind of patient endurance, keeping God's commands and faith in Jesus even under pressure, is a mark of genuine spiritual maturity. And critically, God sees it. He acknowledges their faithfulness, and there's an eternal reward, a blessed rest, waiting for them. It's encouragement to keep going.
Don't give up, even if it costs you everything, because eternal rest awaits.
That's the heart of it. Which brings us to the final section, the two harvests in verses 14 to 20. This feels like the culmination.
It does. We see someone like a son of man on a cloud. That sounds familiar.
Very familiar. Powell immediately links this to Daniel 7.13, the Son of Man figure coming on the clouds, receiving authority and an everlasting kingdom. It clearly identifies this figure as Jesus, exercising his divine authority.
And he has a sickle for reaping.
Yes. An angel comes out and tells him, "Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." Powell explains this initiates the first of two harvests.
Two harvests. Okay, what's the first one?
Verses 14 to 16 describe the Son of Man reaping the earth. Powell suggests this is likely the positive harvest, the gathering of the righteous, the faithful into God's presence. The ripe harvest gathered safely.
Okay, gathering the faithful. Then what's the second harvest?
That starts in verse 17. Another angel comes out, also with a sharp sickle, and another angel, one with power over fire, commands him to gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe.
Grapes this time, not grain. And this one sounds different.
Very different. These grapes are thrown into the great winepress of the wrath of God, and the resulting imagery is intense. Blood flowing from the winepress outside the city up to the horses' bridles for a vast distance.
Whoa, that's graphic. Judgment, clearly.
Undeniably judgment. Powell connects this imagery directly to Old Testament prophecies of judgment, specifically Joel 3.13.
What does Joel say?
Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, tread, for the winepress is full, the vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. It's the same harvest and winepress metaphor for executing judgment.
Okay, so Joel sets the stage. Any others?
Powell also points to Isaiah 63.1-6. This is that incredibly powerful passage where God describes himself treading the winepress alone, his garments stained with blood, because it's the day of vengeance. It vividly portrays God personally executing judgment on his enemies.
So the Son of Man gathers his own, and then the angels execute God's wrath on the wicked, pictured as treading grapes in a winepress.
That's the picture, yes. Powell sees the overall application here as a powerful affirmation. It's Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, who brings history to its climax. Not empires, not human movements, but him. There's a final divine reckoning coming for all injustice and unbelief.
A confirmation of ultimate divine sovereignty.
Exactly. It ties everything together: judgment, salvation, and Christ's ultimate authority.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to take in from just one chapter.
Yep.
This has been, well, a really deep dive thanks to Brother Powell's analysis.
It really packs a punch, doesn't it? Chapter 14 covers so much ground.
So if we were to summarize the big theological takeaways Powell helps us see, what would they be?
I think first, the urgency of proclaiming that eternal gospel creator, judge, savior, especially as judgment looms. Second, the stark eternal difference between faithfulness and compromise. The consequences are real.
Right. The two paths are laid out so clearly.
And third, Christ's central role. He's the Lamb who protects his own, and he's the Son of Man who judges, fulfilling all those Old Testament threads. Savior and judge.
So the challenge coming out of this, based on Powell's work, seems to be about how we live now.
Definitely. It's a call to live distinct, holy lives, to consciously resist those Babylon-like influences, whether they're cultural, economic, whatever, and crucially, to proclaim the whole gospel, grace and truth, without watering it down. It's about active faithfulness.
Active faithfulness in light of both the promise and the warning.
Precisely. And maybe that leaves us and everyone listening with a final thought to chew on.
Okay, what's that?
Just thinking about these huge themes we've touched on, God's absolute sovereignty over history, his coming judgment, but also our individual choices, our responsibility to remain faithful. How do those two realities, divine sovereignty and human responsibility, actually intersect in our own lives today, in practical terms?
How does God's big plan connect with my small choices right now? That's definitely something to reflect on further.
Yeah. How do these ancient visions shape how we live Monday to Friday?
Indeed. Well, thank you for guiding us through that analysis. Lots to think about.
My pleasure. It's powerful stuff.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the deep dive. Hopefully that sparked some thought. We'll catch you on the next one.